The ancient walls, once cracked and crumbling, started to rebuild themselves. The temple glowed with light, and the once-lost kingdom of Ashoka began to return. The city of Ashoka was slowly, miraculously restored. As Amara and Kofi watched in awe, they saw the once barren streets fill with life. The people returned, not in their physical forms but as spirits, guiding the restoration of the city. The trees grew tall again, the buildings rose from the ashes, and the air felt alive with the pulse of a civilization long forgotten. The pendant that Amara held in her hands began to glow. It was no longer just a symbol of the past. It had become the key to the city's revival. The pendant's light pulsed in rhythm with the heartbeats of the land, and as it glowed brighter, the ancient city seemed to awaken. The restoration was not just a physical rebuilding, but a spiritual reclamation of the lost kingdom. Amara and Kofi stood side by side, watching the transformation unfold before them. Where there had once been ruins, now towers rose high into the sky, their stone walls gleaming in the light of the setting sun. The streets, once empty, were filled with the sounds of life, the laughter of children, the clinking of tools as craftsmen worked, and the hum of merchants setting up their stalls. "It's happening," Kofi whispered, barely able to contain his astonishment. "We're really doing it." But Amara's gaze was fixed on something else. In the distance, at the very heart of the city, stood an ancient palace, its towering spires gleaming like a beacon in the distance. It was the seat of Ashoka's power, the place where his empire had once been ruled. The pendant, still warm in Amara's hand, seemed to pull her toward it. Without a word, she began walking in that direction, her every step steady and sure. Kofi followed closely behind, his curiosity piqued. As they approached the palace gates, the spirits of the old kingdom seemed to gather around them, swirling in a quiet, ethereal dance. They were not merely ghosts. They were guides, protectors, and remnants of the people who had once lived in the city. Amara and Kofi entered the palace, their footsteps echoing in the grand hallway. The once vast rooms, now empty and cold, began to warm with the presence of those who had lived here. The walls seemed to hum with energy, as if the very air was alive with the memories of Ashoka's reign. They made their way to the throne room. At the far end of the room stood the throne itself, a massive seat of stone carved with intricate symbols of power, wisdom, and sacrifice. The throne had stood empty for centuries, but now Amara could sense something stirring in the air. It was as if the throne was calling to her, urging her to take her place. She stepped forward, the pendant still glowing in her hand, and placed it on the armrest of the throne. As soon as the pendant touched the stone, the room seemed to come alive. The air shimmered with light, and the walls were filled with voices. The voices of the people who had lived in the kingdom. The voices of those who had once sworn allegiance to Ashoka. Suddenly, a figure appeared before them. It was a man, tall and regal, with a crown upon his head and a look of quiet authority in his eyes. He was dressed in ancient robes, and his presence was both commanding and serene. Amara felt a chill run down her spine, but it was not a feeling of fear. It was a feeling of recognition. "This is him," she whispered. "Ashoka." The figure nodded, as if acknowledging her statement. His voice, though soft, carried the weight of centuries. "You have returned the kingdom to its rightful place, but there is more to be done," he said, his gaze shifting between Amara and Kofi. "The kingdom may be restored, but it is not yet whole. You must make the final choice." Kofi stepped forward, his brow furrowed with confusion. "What do you mean?" "We've brought the city back. We've restored its glory." Ashoka's gaze turned toward Kofi, and he spoke with deep, resonant wisdom. Restoration is not just about rebuilding the physical, it is about healing the wounds of the past. Ashoka's kingdom fell because of the arrogance and pride of those who sought power without understanding its cost. You must decide how to shape the future of this city. Amara's heart raced. The weight of Ashoka's words sank deep into her consciousness. She had thought that restoring the city would be the end of their journey, but now she understood that it was only the beginning. The true challenge lay in what would come next. Kofi, ever the realist, asked, "What must we do? What is the choice we must make?" Ashoka's eyes softened. The kingdom's power is a double-edged sword. If you use it to dominate others, it will crumble once again. But if you use it to foster unity, compassion, and understanding, the city will flourish. Amara held the pendant tightly, feeling the weight of its power. She understood now. The choice was not about her. It was about the future of the kingdom and the legacy they would leave behind. They could use the restored kingdom for personal gain, or they could use it to create something greater, something that honored the true spirit of Ashoka's reign. She turned to Kofi, her eyes filled with determination. "We choose the path of unity and compassion. We will rebuild this kingdom not for power, but for the people." Ashoka's figure nodded in approval. "You have made the right choice," he said, his voice fading into the ether. "Now, the kingdom is truly restored. Go forth and lead with wisdom, for the fate of this city lies in your hands." With that, the spirit of Ashoka disappeared, leaving Amara and Kofi alone in the throne room. The room was now bathed in a golden light, and the once ruined palace had been fully restored. The city of Ashoka was reborn, not just in its structures, but in its spirit. Amara and Kofi left the palace and stood on the steps, looking out over the city. The people, both the living and the spirits, had gathered in the streets to celebrate. The kingdom was no longer a relic of the past. It was a living, breathing entity, filled with hope for the future. "We did it," Kofi said, his voice filled with awe. Amara smiled, her heart full of hope. "Yes, we did. But this is just the beginning. We must lead with wisdom and ensure that the mistakes of the past are never repeated." And so, the restoration of Ashoka's kingdom became not just a story of rebirth, but a story of redemption. A kingdom once lost to history was now a symbol of unity, compassion, and the enduring power of second chances. The people, both past and present, had found their way back home. And as the sun set over the newly restored city, Amara and Kofi knew that their journey was far from over. It was only just beginning.